Yeah, we're going to talk about what happened to the defense at the end of the game against Missouri. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jay, there's been a lot of talk about the Oklahoma Sooners defense as they kind of let it slip away a little bit in the second half. And I'll say this, I was one of those people immediately after the game that was kind of hard on the defense, talking about how it slipped away. Again, Oklahoma had a 9-3 lead coming out of halftime and allowed Drew Pine to have a lot of success in that second half. At the same time, I will say this, the offense didn't do them any favors.
No. I normally would not say much on that portion of it because the ball positioning and placement was not very optimal. But the one thing I will point out, and which this has been pointed out, like you said, over the last couple of days, is that drive, 8 plays, 57 seconds.
Yeah.
That was a massive lapse of judgment and thought for the defense. We should not have let them drive the field on that possession to tie the game.
With such ease.
With such ease. It was 2 minutes left. You take the lead on a scoop and score. Sooner Magic shows that it rears its head is real. And as soon as Sooner Magic shows up, it just fizzles away.
Yep. Should have been over.
Should have been over. Should have been over. And yeah, so for me, I still believe the defense is good. We've seen it do so many great things. I mean, statistically, we've held teams down which is kind of a shocker. But the 2 touchdowns by Theo Weiss,
Killer.
You knew that he was going to get up for this game. You knew that he was ready for this one. Got to do better in that aspect. Well, that to me was a struggle.
The first one was just because they weren't aligned. They were not where they needed to be. It was 3rd and goal from the 13-yard line. Like Missouri gets down to the 10, you create a negative play on the Dominic Williams strip that Drew Pine jumps on, and then you get a tackle for loss, setting up a 3rd and 13. That's a get off the field down in distance for Oklahoma,
100%.
Or at least force a field goal. And because you're not aligned properly, they run this bubble tunnel screen, and it's easy money for them.
Yep.
It's because you're not aligned properly. And that's one of those situations right there where the head coach, the defensive staff have to recognize what's going on such a critical down. You have to recognize it. You've got to call timeout. You've got to. Not having your team lined up at the snap has been such an issue. I've listened to Tate and Gabe talk about this all season long. It's been an issue. And I think you don't even need their expert opinions to be able to tell you that it's been an issue. You can see it with your eyes too. Then that final drive, again, some of it is the ease in which it happened. Theo Weiss getting 28 yards on the first down of the drive, getting them into plus territory. And it kind of all goes from there. Oklahoma gets them into a 3rd and 16. Again, a get off the field money down for the Oklahoma Sooners. Well, what do? They rush 3. And R. Mason Thomas getting triple teamed still almost generates pressure. You drop 8 into coverage and you still can't cover. Jacoby Johnson, I love you, man, but you got to keep your feet, dude. You got to. If you keep your feet, that's potentially ball game. Woody Washington, you've got all this experience in the world. Why are we letting Luther Burden just run free by you? I know that you're expecting safety help. I get that. I know that you're protecting the flat. I understand that's your responsibility in that situation. You've got to err more on the side of caution towards Luther Burden. If you give up a flat play, okay, you give up a flat play, but you're still keeping the ball in front of you. Listen, you got to protect the deep ball. You cannot let them get a deep ball like that in that situation, in that moment. And I'm sure the coverage responsibility lied with Jacoby Johnson in the deep third. I totally get that. But if that was the call, Zach Alley, what are we doing letting Luther Burden have that much space? Whether Jacoby Johnson falls down or not. Because you're still relying on your guy making a play on Luther Burden in a 50-50 situation.
Why don't you have Eli Bowen shadowing Luther Burden at all times? Eli has the speed. They're almost the same size. They're roughly the same size, dudes. That's the guy that you should have on them. And so, yeah, that's a lapse of that's what you get out of a young defensive coordinator. Venables is focused on everything else in the game. Young DC doing it. That's on them. That's one of
Well,
those
I think
we
they
need
just
to
have their corners playing one side of the field. You know,
Yeah.
like Eli Bowen, he's their left cornerback.
No.
You know? And then they
Make him
rotate that right
follow.
corner. You know, and so they don't play the follow game, but maybe they're going to have to with Eli Bowen at some point in the future because he's just that dang good.
Yeah, do pattern matching, something. Just have him shadow the dude. Make it. You can shadow him in zone, but if there's anything you need to know where the heck that dude was at.
Mhm.
That's going to be important. You're gonna have an even bigger test next week. You got Ryan Williams coming to town, and the bad part is that he's a phenom, but he ain't their best wide receiver. He's a young phenom though, so you gotta keep an eye on him. You gotta keep an eye on Law. You got a lot of players at Alabama to keep your eyes on, especially after what they did to LSU this past weekend. You got a lot of stuff that you got to keep your eyes on. So that's, to me, is going to be the next big struggle for Oklahoma, is figuring out how we're going to defend those. And then, oh yeah, don't forget, they've got a quarterback that likes to run. We just let Drew Pine scramble on us. Of all people, Drew Pine got to scramble on us. Now we got to see a dude that actually runs the ball and design runs. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that we've done well overall. Defense got to step up for this game. At least keep it competitive. If the game's competitive, nobody's going to complain. If this game's not competitive, somebody getting fired.
I go back to looking at this game and man, you've gotten a lot out of your defense this year. You've gotten so much. They've played well. I think what we've seen is they're a good defense. They're not a great defense yet. They're not near an elite defense, because a great defense and elite defense gets a stop in that final 2 minutes. A great defense and elite defense is able to slow down Drew Pine. You're able to maybe force a turnover or two. You're maybe able to not let that 2 minute drill look so easy. You're not giving up a 28-yarder on the first play of the 2 minute drill. Great defenses, elite defenses make the offense struggle for every single yard. Yep. Doesn't matter the situation. But we've seen advancement. We've seen progression. We've seen development out of this defense. My biggest offseason question is going to be who fills the vacuum and who fills the void left by Danny Stutsman and Billy Bowman next year. That leadership, that tenacity, that performance on the field. For some of the things that Billy Bowman hasn't done great this year, he's made some really big time plays for you. The 4th and 1 stop on Luther Burden, the scoop and score that got you the lead in the game. Danny Stutsman, obviously one of Oklahoma's best defensive players over the last decade or more. You're going to miss that guy. You've got talented guys coming up behind them, but are they going to be able to rise to the same level of play and production and leadership on the field that you've had out of Danny Stutsman and Billy Bowman over the last couple of years? That's going to be one of the big offseason questions for a defense that is littered with talent. Yeah,
we've got a lot of young talent that is at that age now where they're ready to take over. You've got, this is the year where every single player is a Brent Venables staff selected player. Luckily, the linebacker room is the one I'm not concerned about.
Right.
Secondary, it's time to see those dudes step up. I mean, we did lose one, unfortunately, but with Josiah Wagner when he transferred out. But now it's time to see if these other guys are ready to step in and be those players. So, seatbelt, Makari Vickers, it's your time, right? Jacoby, it's your time. Eli, it's your time. Newcomb, you're young, but it's your time. It's time for y'all to start showing up and showing us that you guys are the recruits that we thought you were.
Yeah, that cornerback room has to step up in particular over the next year because it's got to get better. If there's an area on the defense that has to improve the most, that's the position. And with Eli Bowen, you've locked down one side. If Gentry Williams can come back healthy, you feel great about your other side. And you've got two corners that can make a lot of plays for you. Why does the SEC hate Oklahoma?